Welcome to Strip Coverlet, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Fort, and we are here for another poetry discussion, which will appear in two separate playlists here on the channel. Number one, obviously, being the poetry discussion playlist, now cruising towards 300 poetry discussions, but also the Charles Bukowski playlist, which is cruising towards 200 or 100 poetry discussions on its own. So, the poem in question today is Death Wants More Death, and it reads as such. Death wants more death, and its webs are full. I remember my father's garage, how childlike I would brush the corpses of flies from the windows they thought were escaping their sticky, ugly, vibrant bodies, shouting like dumb, crazy dogs against the glass, only to spin and flit in that second larger than hell or heaven onto the edge of the ledge. And then the spider from his dank hole, nervous and exposed, the puff of body swelling, hanging there, not really quite knowing, and then knowing something sending it down its string. The web toward the weak shield of buzzing, the pulsing, a last desperate moving hair leg, there against the glass, there alive in the sun, spun in white and almost like love. The closing over, the first hushed spider sucking, filling its sack upon the thing that lived, crouching there upon its back, drawing its certain blood. As the world goes by outside and my temples scream and I hurl the broom against them, the spider dull with spider anger, still thinking of its prey and waving an amazed broken leg, the fly very still. A dirty speck stranded to straw, I shake the killer loose, and he walks, lame and peeved, towards some dark corner. But I intercept his dawdling, his crawling like some broken hero, and the straws smash his legs. Now waving above his head and looking for the enemy, and somewhat valiant, dying without apparent pain, simply crawling backward, piece by piece, leaving nothing there until the last red gut sack splashes its secrets, and I run childlike, with God's anger a step behind, back to simple sunlight, wondering as the world goes by with curled smile if anyone else saw or sensed my crime. Now, Bukowski says here, I wonder if anyone saw or sensed my crime, but we have to wonder if the speaker, well, I guess it's Chinaski, if the speaker considers this thing to be a crime or not. It seemed to be valiant at the time. It seemed to be an act of heroism. It seemed to be that thing which maybe makes the killing the spider did right. To avenge the loss of another stupid fly. The fly who thought he was escaping but was not. So up here, earlier in the poem, very early in the poem, I remember my father's garage. I think that's important. And I think that it's important on the sort of Bukowski level as well as on the poem level. I don't believe in the idea that you have to know anything about the poet to get something out of a poem. If you have to know the poet to get something out of a poem, it means the poem is not very good. If the poet has to explain or be explained for, it means the poem is not very good. Still, we do have some idea about Bukowski. One of his earliest published poems was called My Old Man, a title ripped from Hemingway. But in this poem, Bukowski returns home from school and his father has found his writing, and his father is angry because his father is always angry. There are many poems throughout Bukowski's library, Bukowski's canon, the canon of Chucky Buck, that has a negative father figure, that features a negative father figure. So, if we can bring in another Chuck Palahniuk in Fight Club says that our model for God is our Father. And if our Father didn't like us, what does that mean about God? So we have here the main character of this poem, the I in question, the speaker, playing the role of God. We have the speaker here playing the role of God in response to the works of nature that he just saw play out. But if God did not intend for nature to play out this way, why would he have designed nature in this fashion? That, if you ask me, is the big sin at the end. That is what it is that is the thing from which our narrator at the end is running. If anyone saw the crime in question is vengeance. Vengeance for what? Vengeance for the spider doing what spiders do. Taking one more step back from this poem, oftentimes in Bukowski, death, the idea of death, is not, particularly speaking, to be construed with mortal death. Death can be so simple as giving up, stopping those artistic endeavors and pursuits, giving up whatever it is that made the you, you. That is a type of death in Bukowski. And in that way, what this poem is Bukowski saying, don't give those things up. I write these poems. I extract these little acts of vengeance upon creation. I extract these little bits of vengeance on creation, these poems that I write, in order that you may continue to create, that you may continue to do what it is that makes you, you. Which then, in the extended metaphor, means that the natural progression of things, like this fly being caught by the spider, is that creative part of us, is that individualistic part of us necessarily dying, necessarily being consumed. Is that true? Do we go to art? Do we go to the creative in order that that creative bit of us, that individualistic bit of us keeps going on? And is this an unnatural process? It seems, as far back as we have any history of people that have the same hardware that we do, we have not reason to believe, we have evidence that they were creative. The 12,000-year-old cave paintings in France. The fact that even Neanderthals, to whom we are only distantly related, were often found buried with, A, buried ritualistically, but B, buried with jewelry. Is this evidence that the creative part of us goes back way, way, way far? So long as we've had the same or comparable hardware, the software that runs on it is indelibly creative? Is it therefore natural or unnatural? Is it primitive in us, or is it cultured out of us that this artistic part of us should die? And look, you can say that I'm just making that up. You can argue with me that that happens, but look at the older people around you and compare them to the youngest people around you and tell me, like for like, which group is the more creative type. How many of the 80-year-olds in your life engage in creative play? How many of the 80-year-olds in your life are completely immersed in, for example, Halloween? Whereas those children, when they say they're a witch for that day, right? Is this thing ground out of us by nature or nurture? Is it right? Is it natural that we should turn to art and artists like Bukowski to stoke that fire within us? I think that these are all interesting questions. I'm afraid I don't have any answers. That is all I have for this poetry discussion. If you enjoy or appreciate what I do here on the channel, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, there is always a reason to stick around. I've got poetry videos every Monday if you decide to hit that subscribe button, but there are also short story read-alongs and novel read-alongs as well. And hey, I hope to have you back for the next one.